The movie shows one Yo-seon waiting for her mother to pick her up after school. Soon, her mother called her, telling her she couldn't come to pick her up. So, Yo-seon had to go home by bus. Yo-seon was unlucky that day. Shortly after she got off the bus, it started to rain. Instead of taking shelter, she preferred covering her head with her backpack and walking home. Shortly after, a car suddenly pulled over near her, and the man inside offered her a ride. Strangely enough, she didn't seem suspicious of the man in the car. She got into the car, thinking the good guy would take her home. But, of course, she never made it home. 10 days later, Yo-seon's body was found in a red suitcase on the side of a river. News of the discovery of her body was broadcast by a television station. A bag store owner, Kim Song-young, saw the news. He remembered that the red suitcase was one he had in his shop. He had previously sold it to a man, who wrote his name on a check as On Song-yoon. Shortly after he received the check, Song-young went to the pizza shop to fill his stomach. But to his surprise, when he saw the name tag of the pizza delivery guy at the store, he found out that the employee had the name On Song-yoon, just like the guy who bought the red suitcase. He was astonished by the similarity of the two names, but then he thought it was just a coincidence. Actually, the pizza delivery man's name was indeed On Song-yoon, and at that time, Song-yoon was tasked with delivering pizza to a customer who lived in an apartment. Apparently, the customer was none other than the man who bought the red suitcase, Ryu Sung-hyuk. He was also the one who kidnapped Yo-seon and killed the girl. He could have kidnapped Yo-seon easily because he was her neighbor in the apartment building. So, when it was raining that night, he offered her a ride. She didn't suspect it at all because she already knew him. Meanwhile, Song-young now believed that the man who bought his red suitcase was the same one who killed Yo-seon. He decided to call the police to give them the information. But his wife stopped him just as he was about to press the call button. She doesn't want them involved in the case. If people discover that the killer bought the briefcase from their store, it will ruin their store's reputation, and no one will ever buy from them again. Song-young agreed with his wife, and then he threw away his plan to call the police. At the pizza shop, Song-yoon finally finds out about Yo-seon's murder. He was too suspicious that Ryu was the killer. 10 days before the incident, there was a murder case with the same modus operandi, and Ryu always ordered pizza every 10 days. But what made Song-yoon suspect him the most was that he heard strange noises from downstairs Ryu's apartment when he last delivered pizza to him. Song-yoon then told his suspicion to his boss, the pizza shop owner, but he told Song-yoon not to think about it too much. What's more, he put his suspicions without any solid evidence. At the same time, Yo-seon's stepmother, Song Kyung-hee, was still devastated by the death of her stepdaughter. She felt guilty for not picking up Yo-seon on the night of the kidnapping. She felt Yo-seon's spirit was always haunting her, resulting in her fear of being alone at home. But her husband didn't believe her story about Yo-seon's ghost. He even forbade her to mention Yo-seon's name. He would feel sad if Kyung-hee kept bringing up their daughter's name. In the meantime, the police suspected a loan shark named On Hyuk-mo as the murderer of Yo-seon. They took him to the police station for further questioning. But in the end, they were forced to release him for lack of evidence. But reason enough if the police suspect Hyuk-mo. He was a ruthless loan shark who tried to torture his uncle just because he was late paying debts. After returning from the police station, Hyuk-mo decided to return to his apartment and discovered that the parking spot he usually used had been taken by Ryu. Enraged, he then spit it on Ryu's windshield before going to Ryu's apartment, telling him to remove the car from his parking spot. Ryu did not want to cause trouble with such a rude man, so he followed Hyuk-mo's recourse to move his car. But even so, he wasn't happy if his car was spit on. So, when he discovered that Hyuk-mo had spit on his car windshield, he demanded an explanation for why he did that. And in answer, Hyuk-mo spat on his windshield again and told him to move his car quickly. Seeing Hyuk-mo's arm covered in tattoos, Ryu didn't dare to argue. He rushed to move his car from Hyuk-mo's parking spot. A while after that, an apartment security guard found out Ryu had thrown the garbage improperly. So, with the garbage pack, he came to Ryu's apartment and reprimanded him for tidier arranging his trash. But Ryu ignored the security and told him to leave. Upset by his treatment, the security man opened the garbage bag right in front of Ryu, intending to throw the contents at him. But how shocked the security man was when he saw what was in the garbage bag. He found Yo-seon's school uniform. At this moment, Ryu was still peering from the doorway, and when he saw the security guy had discovered his secret, he immediately attacked him and dragged him into his apartment. The following day, he returned to the bag store to buy 2 suitcases the same size as the last one he had bought. Meanwhile, the loss of the security guard began to worry Pyo Jong-rok, his fellow security officer, and Ha Tae-seon, the apartment manager. Tae-seon had asked security to check on one of the apartments whose water bills have been rising recently. Since the security guy disappeared without any news, he asked Jong-rok to replace his partner in checking the apartment in case there was a leaky pipe. That troubled apartment was nothing but Ryu's apartment. It's only natural that his water bill soared because he had used a lot of water to cleanse his victim's blood. In fact, right now, he's cleansing the blood of the security guard he just killed. When he was busy cleaning the floor, he got a call from Jong-rok, who wanted to ask if a pipe in his apartment was leaking. Before Ryu could answer the question, he heard the sound of the bell ringing from the front door. Then he turned off his cell phone and put it on the table. He went to check who had slammed the doorbell. But while he was walking away, Jong-rok kept calling him, and the ringing made his cell phone fall into the suitcase under the table. The briefcase was then automatically closed and locked. The person who rang the bell was Tae-son, who came to talk about the residents' monthly meeting plans. At first, Ryu refused to take part, but after he found out that the meeting was going to talk about Yo-son's death, he invited Tae-son to come into his apartment. Once inside, Tae-son revealed that she was planning to install CCTV in the apartment building to prevent the same crime from happening again. But before installing those cameras, she needed the residents' approval, including Ryu's. Ryu replied that she did not need his approval or anything because he would soon move out of the apartment. Hearing that, she checked inside to see if Ryu was taking good care of the apartment. At this point, Ryu couldn't help but feel his frustration for Tae-son, who had been bothering him. So, he grabbed a blunt object nearby, intending to use it to kill her. Luckily for Tae-son, though, before Ryu could hit her, her phone rang, and when she picked it up, she immediately told the caller that she was in Ryu's apartment. It made Ryu throw away his plan to kill her, because if someone reported that Tae-son was last in his apartment before she died, the police would automatically suspect him. Meanwhile, outside the apartment building, Kyung-hee seemed to have just returned when she bumped into a girl who looked like Yo-son. Since the girl looked much like his stepdaughter, Kyung-hee suspected the girl was Yo-son's ghost. But it turns out that the girl was one of the residents of the apartment building. Her name is Yoo Soo-yeon. At this point, Kyung-hee missed her late stepdaughter a lot. So, when she saw Soo-yeon very much like Yo-son, she invited the girl to her apartment where they could chat freely. They entered the apartment right when Ryu came out of it. And when he saw Soo-yeon, he thought the girl was Yo-son, the girl he killed a few days ago. So, out of fear, he returned to his apartment and peered out of the door. And soon enough, he realized it was a different girl from his victim. Sometime later, Soo-yeon left Kyung-hee's apartment, and Kyung-hee was aware that Ryu was watching Soo-yeon while she left as if he had an interest in the girl. Shortly after, Jong-rok came to Ryu's apartment, reasoning that he wanted to check the water in his apartment in case something leaked. Of course, Ryu wouldn't let him, saying that the water in his apartment was fine and there wasn't a single leak. But Jong-rok insisted on checking. If Ryu won't let him in, he says he'll be back tonight with some professional plumber. Hearing that, Ryu panicked, and so he allowed Jong-rok to come in and check the drains. But when Jong-rok checked the plumbing in the bathroom, he accidentally found hair and blood spots on the floor, making him suspicious of Ryu. So, before Ryu could harm him, he quickly rose and said he didn't find a leak in the waterway. Then, without saying anything else, he hurriedly left the apartment. After returning to his security post, Jong-rok spent some time thinking about hair and blood in Ryu's apartment, and he was almost wholly convinced Ryu was the killer. But Jong-rok could not report it to the police because he did not want to be involved in the case. Jong-rok was a fugitive and only needed 5 more months before his statute of limitations ran out. He didn't want to risk inviting the cops into the apartment building since it could have been his crime, and thus he chose to remain silent. A few days later, Hyuk-mo returned to find out that Ryu had hacked into his parking spot again. This time he had lost his temper. He slapped Ryu on the head with his sandal to teach him a lesson not to steal his parking spot again. Ryu apologized to Hyuk-mo and promised he would never repeat his mistakes. But as soon as Hyuk-mo left, he cursed Hyuk-mo, swearing revenge on him. But before taking revenge, Ryu had to find a job first. Coincidentally, he found a vacancy for a raid job. When his future employer asked him about his phone number, he realized that his phone was missing. So, he rushed back home, and this was when he realized his phone was in a sealed suitcase. Worse, he could not open the suitcase because he did not know the combination. He called Song-yeon to ask for the combination number. Song-yeon told him that the combination had been set to 0 by 3. But Ryu didn't believe him since he had tried that combination before, and it didn't open. But at this moment, Ryu suddenly got a good idea. He could use the loss of his phone to trap Hyuk-mo. For this reason, he deliberately searches for a problem with Hyuk-mo and challenges him to a fight. He took a baton with him and deliberately released it when Hyuk-mo hit him. Hyuk-mo took the rod and then used it to beat Ryu up. That way, Hyuk-mo's fingerprints were attached to that baton, and Ryu could frame him as a killer because that baton was the weapon Ryu used to kill his victims. Then the following day, Ryu finds out Hyuk-mo's phone number before going to Song-yeon and borrowing his phone. With the phone, he called Hyuk-mo's phone and turned off the line before the phone was picked up. Later that night, he kidnapped Song-yeon and put the baton in his bag store. The tactic worked. The following day, the police arrested Hyuk-mo on charges of kidnapping Song-yeon. As evidence, the police found that Song-yeon called Hyuk-mo before he disappeared, and they also found a baton with Hyuk-mo's fingerprints on the scene. With Hyuk-mo having been caught, Ryu started tailing Soo-yeon, intending to make her the next victim. But Kyung-hee and Jong-rok knew that Ryu was watching Soo-yeon from a distance. When Soo-yeon walked past the security post, Jong-rok warned her to be careful and not to go home alone. Meanwhile, Song-yeon was now being held captive in Ryu's apartment, and he realized that Ryu's phone was still in the suitcase. So, he opened the case and used Ryu's phone to ask for help. In a panic, the phone's battery was running low, so Song-yeon called the pizza delivery guy, Song-yoon. Fortunately, Song-yeon screamed for help before the phone ran out of battery. After realizing that the call had come from Ryu's apartment, Song-yoon immediately slid away to the place. It was raining heavily then, which eventually put the power out. Hyuk-mo used the darkness to escape the police station and return to the apartment building, intending to avenge Ryu for setting him up. Until then, Kyung-hee, who was worried about Soo-yeon, decided to pick her up. But then, they realized that Ryu was following them. Therefore, they deliberately stood in the middle of the highway to attract the attention of other riders, making Ryu unable to approach them. Angry at failing to kidnap Soo-yeon, Ryu returned to his apartment, where Song-yeon, freed from the bond, attacked him immediately. But Song-yeon ended up stabbed by Ryu. Soon, Song-yoon arrived at the apartment building and met with Jong-rok. They decided to go together to Ryu's apartment to stop him. The plan was for Song-yoon to pretend to deliver free pizza to Ryu to open the door. And when the door opens, Jong-rok will squash inside and attack Ryu. Their plan went well, and even better, Hyuk-mo was there to help them beat Ryu. Shortly after that, the power came back on, and they finally found Song-yeon, who had been wounded. Song-yoon quickly called the police and the ambulance while Hyuk-mo beat Ryu mercilessly. Jong-rok, who thought Soo-yeon had been kidnapped by Ryu, also asked where Ryu had her. But at this moment, Jong-rok had a hallucination that made him see Soo-yeon's body. Enraged, he killed Ryu. A moment later, Jong-rok finally realized that Soo-yeon's body he saw was just a hallucination. Soon, police and medical personnel filled the apartment while Hyuk-mo walked into the courtyard. But Tae-seon, who thought that Hyuk-mo had kidnapped her daughter, Soo-yeon, asked hysterically for Hyuk-mo to tell her where he hid Soo-yeon. But the misunderstanding was quickly resolved because then Soo-yeon arrived at the scene along with Kyung-hee. Meanwhile, Jong-rok decided to escape from there. Sooner or later, the police will find out that it was he who killed Ryu. That's why he needed a new hiding place to avoid them. The last scene shows Kyung-hee accepting her daughter's death while Song-yeon reopens his shop after he recovers from his wounds. But this time, he became warier of customers who wanted to buy a suitcase. Song-yeon told his wife that as long as he was held captive by Ryu, he saw Ryu look scared several times. It turns out that it wasn't only Kyung-hee who had been haunted by Yo-seon but also Ryu. And with this, the movie ended.